literally like just came away from dinner with Hilmar, so I've had like a substantial amount of whiskey.
Oh. All right, there goes the ping locally. Ooh. Just gonna
That's good.
should do a Twitter thing too, but I'll do that while we talk. All right. So, in the interest of recorded stuff, I'll just get started right away by opening up and saying that this is going to be a talk about the Alliance tournament. The two guys that are here with me are really people who've been affiliated with it in a very deep way for many years. First is Elise Randolph. How are you doing, Elise?
Pretty good, pretty good. All things considered, I'm doing quite well.
And we also have CCP Falcon, who, if you don't know, was an announcer for the Alliance tournament in the old days, I guess, before he became a CCP employee. How's it going, Falcon?
He actually has one of my favorite moments in like all of Alliance tournament stuff. Is
Really?
Yeah, you were commentating one of the matches with PL that I was like, I had to sit out that match, so I had to watch it. And we took like the Minmatar Rush team, and you just went like, you just made some great hand gestures and some great sounds came out of your body. It was fantastic.
I thought you were gonna say like I was horribly brutal and talk shit about all you guys, but it's really nice to know that I was civil. That's a good thing.
All right, and we got Falcon with some whiskey in him too, so this should get interesting.
No, I will have you know that I'm 100% coherent and sober.
Excellent.
It's quite all right. I'm just really full of steak. I had a really good steak tonight, so I'm feeling nice.
That'll ground you. Well, you know, Falcon, for me too, you were a big representative of Alliance tournament. When I watched it, you were one of the announcers, and there was something about your style, excuse me, that was very authentic. And so when you got enthusiastic, I got enthusiastic. And not to throw too much shade to announcers these days, but it seems like a lot of YouTube, at least when I look over my son's shoulder, is just kids kind of like screaming and raising their voice and just screeching as a way of being funny or being exciting, but the content, what they're saying, isn't really exciting, or do you know what I mean? But it seemed like when you did it, it was authentic. When your voice got up and you started talking faster, it was really authentic.
I mean, anyone who knows me knows that I'm super enthusiastic about Eve. It doesn't matter what's going on with a game, whether I'm chewing rocks or God forbid that I actually have a mine. But if I have to chew rocks, or if I'm dealing with low sec PvP, or I'm actually just sitting in on like a stream that you guys have put together around like a major fleet fight or something like that, I'm always enthusiastic about it. That's why I do this job, and the AT is no exception. I mean, I've been involved with the Alliance tournament since like 2006, 2007. In fact, I don't even know the original year I've been involved with the Alliance tournament since. I know it was Alliance Tournament 4 was the first one that I was involved with. And we're now, Virgin next year, we're in Alliance Tournament 17. So that gives an idea of how invested I've been in the tournament over the years. And, it's always been something that's been very close to my heart. It's always been something that I've absolutely loved. And it will continue to be something that I love and something that I feel is, a super close part of Eve's heritage and history. So, yeah, it's something that I've always enjoyed.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the big questions, right? Is it going to continue to be? Because this year you're taking a hiatus.
Absolutely. I mean, we turned around last year, and I remember the craziness around when we said, hey, we're not going to do FanFest in Reykjavik in 2019. We're going to do something else. Guess what? We're not going to do Alliance Tournament in 2019 in Reykjavik. We're going to do something else. But it's a part of Eve's culture, it's a part of Eve's history, it's a part of Eve's heritage, and exactly what I said in the news that I put out today, like, I'm not going to beat around the bush and I'm not going to bullshit people. Our community deserves better than that. We're taking a hiatus, we're going to reassess, what makes the Alliance tournament what it is, how we can make it better, how we can improve viewership. There's been a lot of, among the toxicity, there's been a lot of good suggestions on Reddit that have come out. There's been some suggestions on the official forums as well. And it's just a matter of taking that into account, wrapping up with the other stuff that we're looking at internally in terms of what we want to do with the tournament going forward, or what we want to do with organized play and sort of PvP combat, organized PvP combat in general. And looking at what we can do to support it. I think, Jintan ran an incredibly successful little tournament recently. Event have been known to do this repeatedly. We've had the Yanga games. We have a Theomashi as well that was based on Thunderdome and Singularity historically, and it's something that it's core to what we do as a community. It's core to who we are, and it's going to continue. It's just sometimes you need to take a little bit of a breather and you need to decide what you're going to do going forward, and that's what we're doing right now. I can understand that people are a little bit upset about it, but really isn't anything to worry about.
Yeah, Elise, you wrote something up and put it out there, and it was kind of like a perspective from your point of view. And you had some interesting things to say about that besides even your history. You want to talk about that, what you wrote?
I mean, even when I write a news item...
Oh, that was to Elise, by the way. Sorry.
Oh, that was Elise. Okay, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was actually because I've spent a disgusting amount of time. I was looking back at it, doing Alliance tournament stuff, and just I was looking at like 8 years or so. Like every summer, I've done something with the Alliance tournament, either as a player or a commentator and like production help with. And it is an extensive amount of work. Like a lot of people were saying, "Oh, just throw it to, if you don't want to do it CCP, just throw it to Event and they'll do it." But it's not just a matter of that, right? There is still a lot of things on the back end, and to get it to be good and to have a quality product, it actually requires so much work that a lot of people don't see. It requires, like, to do it right, you have to have tools to help facilitate the matches. You need quite a bit of like dev time and for camera tools and all that, and you have to have the actual physical people in space to move the pilots, which can get daunting. And so I would rather. I'm kind of glad that. Well, not glad. I wish there was an Alliance warrant. I'm not gonna be sad or lie about that, but I'm glad that we're getting a better product in a year rather than a rushed kind of crummy product this year. Like if you don't have the resources to make it good, just don't keep doing the same thing and drive it down. At least that was my take on it.
Well, especially there was some talk that the audience was getting smaller and smaller these last 2 years. Is that right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, definitely. Like I've been doing the production for it for the last year and was looking deep into it the year before. It's definitely something that I've always, as an announcer for the Alliance Tournament, it was always kept my eyes on, see how many people were watching. And after EveBet and all the other betting stopped, a lot of people stopped watching the Alliance Tournament because that's one of the things that the old veteran players and even newer players really got into. They had a way to interact with the Alliance Tournament without playing with it, and that was through EveBet. That was a huge thing, a huge part of what made it popular. And when that went away, when that was like taken out of the game, uh, kind of interest began to wane a little bit. And last year, I think we're smaller numbers than Alliance Tournament 10 even.
So EveBet had a big impact on people not getting to be as interested.
Yeah, with the no, well, there was all the other betting sites too, like I1isk or whatever, and some people even had. I know Test had like a little in-house betting thing going on where you could gamble on the outcome of your matches. But that was like a huge part of the culture of the Alliance tournament. If you weren't playing in it, you were watching it to bet on who was going to win, and then you'd either make a bunch of money or you'd lose a bunch of money, but you were invested in it in some way, even without playing.
Yeah, I mean, like, look at it from my point of view. I mean, like, I just purely out of for my own kind of personal peace of mind. I've never bet on the AT, especially not being a CCP, or I've never put myself in that position. But another sport that I love and that I follow constantly is Formula One. And I'm constantly involved in Formula One fantasy leagues. I'm always betting on races, who's going to come out on top, who's going to get pole, if there's going to be a Grand Slam, that kind of thing. And it's a thing that I absolutely love. And I can totally understand the want and the will to flex your muscle in terms of knowledge about who's fighting and what's going on and wanting to bet and wanting to put your risk on it. It's not a problem at all. But with the shutdown of hiatus, with the shutdown of EveBet and a few other things, the dynamic around what you can and can't do related to the Alliance tournament obviously has changed, and that's had an effect on the audience. And we've absolutely taken that into account. The main thing for us is really focusing on having a different approach to what we're doing in 2019, and then coming back in 2020 with a fresh appeal. I mean, it's the same thing for FanFest as well. We decided to to take a hiatus in 2019 for various different reasons. And part of those reasons is just reassessing what we want to do and making things bigger, badder, and better. Like, our community deserves something awesome. And if we're not in a position where that we feel that we can deliver for staffing reasons, for resource reasons, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's entirely irrelevant. But what it boils down to is if we don't feel like we can deliver something, or we want to decide to switch things up and do something differently, and we want to take the time out to decide what that's going to be, then we would rather do that than deliver something that isn't up to par.
Yeah, and I guess it was going to be. Is it fair to say it was going to be too hard to get it together this year?
I mean, it's no secret since sort of like, for the last year or so, that it's been pretty tough on the community team. We've got a lot of smaller team. We've been wearing a few extra hats, that kind of thing. That's just how life is. But we're in relatively good shape now. We've got a good group of people together, and it's just a case of really deciding what we want to do going forward and how we want to do things. I mean, a big part of our focus for 2019 is obviously quality of life. People on r/eve will hang me from the rafters about talking about balance, but it's something that we want to focus on this year as well. And we've got the world tour coming up that we announced in 2018, and there's a lot of effort going into that. So
Right.
we've got we're trying something a little bit different for this year.
Yeah.
But we fully understand and accept, and this is actually something that I was talking to people earlier today about, that there's a lot of history, there's a lot of heritage in EVE Online. I mean, I know that myself. I've been around since beta. Shit, I mean, I've been around since Phoenix, and it's just the
And
amount of history that we've got is unbelievable.
you've been visible too. It's not like you were playing the game in obscurity. You were
I mean, the thing is,
well-known pirate.
yeah, I mean, the thing is, no one could stop me from talking shit about Eve if they wanted to. Like, whether it's good stuff, whether it's bad stuff, whether it's having an opinion on something, I'm always very vocal about Eve because I love it. It's what I do, and I'm incredibly privileged to be able to work on Eve. Like, I've always felt that way since I joined CCP in 2012. Hell, I would have joined earlier if I could. But it's just, yeah, I mean, it's something that we just really, when we're looking at AT specifically, we just really need to reassess what we want to do with it, how we want to support it, how we can actually support player tournaments as well going forward as well. Because I mean, I've mentioned it earlier. I don't want to name drop people, but I'm going to because they've done a sterling effort. I mean, people like Anger Games, people like Event, Jinton, who's ran his own tournament. We've tried different setups ourselves as well. I mean, we've tried the New Eden Open, we tried the Amar Championships as well. And these are great things to tease and to mess around with. But we need to come up with a solid format going forward. And I think just taking a breather, being able to reassess what we're doing, and then looking to come back bigger and stronger it's always a positive thing.
One of the big criticisms, because I read the entire thread and all the rage threads and whatever on Reddit,
You have
and
my
I think one
biggest
of the big yeah, and one of the big takeaways is, I swear, like 80 to 90% of the people, they just have no idea what the Alliance tournament is or does. They're like, oh, CCB are so dumb. They don't know what the Alliance tournament is. It's not a new player retention tool, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, they know this. They literally know exactly what it is and what it represents. Like you specifically, you've been involved since the very beginning, and like all these players and all these names that stick
So
around for the Alliance tournament and who
I
like are
will
still playing because of it.
I will absolutely be super direct. I mean, I was myself and several other people at CCP were key stakeholders in making this decision and saying, yeah, we're going to take a year out and we're going to reassess what we do. I have an unbelievable amount of respect for the heritage of the AT. Going back to AT4, AT5, AT6, when it was literally a group of guys from Eve Radio and a few devs who were throwing this together. To the point where we were sat in a building across the street from CCP using a friggin' microwave dish to beam Wi-Fi across to the office, and like every time a pigeon flew in front of the Wi-Fi dish, we would lose connection. Like, this was how crazy it was back in the day, and it was a passion project. It was something that we absolutely loved, and we still do to this day. We fully understand the heritage that's behind the AT and some of the crazy stuff that's happened over the years. And it's not like, if you look if you look at the news item that I put out, I'm always very direct in the way that I word things, but I'm never going to mince my words, and I'm never going to bullshit people. Like, we've said we're taking a hiatus. Did I say that the Alliance tournament is not coming back in that news item? Absolutely not, because I firmly believe that it will do. It just, we want to reassess what we're doing, and taking a little bit of time out to decide what you want to do going forward is always the sensible thing when you want to refresh something and look at something in a different light.
Yeah, I saw some really funny posts like, "Oh, this is just corporate speak for them saying that they're gonna exit future in the future." And I was like, "Have you ever read or heard anything by CCP Falcon ever? He
There's
doesn't do
so
corporate speak."
this is the one thing that my boss CCP Grendel hates about me is I always speak my mind. I'm like, if shit's gonna go down, I'm gonna talk about it, and that's the way that it is. And he can't shut me up in the office, so he's got no hope in hell of shutting me up publicly either. Because I'm super enthusiastic about Eve. I love it, and I'm never gonna mince my words. Our community deserves better. And I would never put myself in a position where I would go all dirty corporate speak on people. If people want to know answers to questions, they can 100% ping me on Twitter, catch me on Discord, or just send me a friggin' email, and I'll talk to them about things.
I
I've
love
no
that
worries at all.
dirty corporate speak. That's hilarious.
I don't do dirty corporate speak. I despise it in every form that it is. That's for public relations people. I'm not a PR guy. I'm a community manager. I love people, and that's what I do.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's. One thing I wanted to do is a couple things. One, we've talked about what's going to happen in the future with the Alliance tournament. It's going to come back. It wasn't ready. They weren't going to half-ass it this year, so they're saving it for next year, and they're going to reassess it and figure out how to make it better by looking at what are you going to look at? Like, what are you thinking about when you're looking at making it better?
I mean, it could be anything. It could be we'll probably be looking at everything from the ground up. I mean, we're also going to look at how we support player-run tournaments too.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's something that was highlighted on Reddit and something that's been highlighted on the forums as well. Is that the last few years the rules have been very much the same, and there hasn't been much switch up in terms of what there is, other than slight changes in points differences. Maybe we'd look at changing it completely. It's entirely up in the air, and I wouldn't want to start talking about it right now because this is literally the same day we made the announcement that we're taking a hiatus,
Yeah.
and we've got to consider all our options. We've got to look at things going forward. We've got to decide what we want to do. So yeah, I mean, it's very much an open book, and like we've got so many events coming up this year, and I know that there's going to be a shitload of tournament enthusiasts that are going to be at World Tour events. They're going to be at events that aren't on the World Tour. They're going to be at Vegas. And 100%, if anyone wants to talk shop about the Alliance tournament, they can come and find me at any one of these events, and I'm more than happy to sit down and talk.
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
great thing to have an open dialogue.
I mean, the way the industry, video game industry, handles tournaments is it kind of varies, right? I mean, there's some cash prizes in some games. There's like what look like massive tournaments where people go to that location, like say Korea, to watch the tournament live. And not to say that
Absolutely.
not to say that CCP would be able to do that, but there's just if you look at the what is it esports in general, there's a wide array of like different things that are going on in that arena.
And it's like
Well, I mean,
really, really hard to make a format that works for Eve players too, because you can't like dumb it down too much to make it viewable by any audience. It has to be pretty hardcore because that's the market, right? That's the Alliance Hornet market. They're the best of the best. So it's like really difficult to find that balance. It's easier in other games because a lot of the other games are literally designed around the competitive team aspect. But Eve not isn't necessarily. You kind of have to like shoehorn in this weird set of rules to make it work.
Well, that's one thing I wanted to talk about. What is the Alliance tournament in essence in relationship to the game, right? You have this virtual world. That's not the same as, uh, forgive me for not knowing what these things are called, MOBA style games or first person shooters. Like those games are not perpetual living worlds with long histories. So what's the relationship between this gladiator match that happens as it
so
represents alliances?
I've actually got a I've actually got a very different opinion to most people, I guess, on the Alliance tournament and what it is, because I honestly like 100%. I love the Alliance tournament. I think it's great. I think it's a massive showcase for skill in PvP. But I think it's skill in PvP that's not representative of skill in PvP on TQ as a whole, because it's an isolated environment. It's a controlled environment. You have a rule set. You're going in knowing that you can field X number of ships, X number of points. You're fielding a given number of hulls. You always know that you're never going to be outnumbered by a factor of X. You're in a position where the situation that you're in is very controlled. Yes, there are a lot of factors that go into it. There's a lot of theory crafting that goes into it. But in the end, it's not entirely as unpredictable as jumping into a low-sec system and even just fighting what comes at you. So a lot of people are like, I saw a few comments on the unofficial subreddit earlier today that were more along the lines of, this is killing PvP and EVE. This is PvP and EVE is never going to be the same. Actually, nothing changes. Whether the Alliance tournament is there or not, actual PvP on the live game server doesn't change one little bit. It's still there. It's still something that can be done by anyone, anywhere, anytime. It's just we've got a different dynamic now because we're not going to have Alliance tournament in 2019. It's not going to change anything in terms of day-to-day activity for people who just want to go out there and shoot stuff in a live game environment. It just means that those guys who, crave that sort of organized PvP and the bracket system just aren't going to have that this year, at least not officially from CCP.
And this isn't the first time that the format of the Alliance tournament has changed, even a little bit drastically, right? So before Alliance Tournament 6, there's a completely different rule set with different prizes. You would have to nominate a faction you wanted to work for, and the prizes were like faction LP. After that, after Alliance Tournament 6, from 7 and onwards, is where you get the ships. And even then, the prizes have been like completely redone. We've moved from like 6 players to 12 players to 10 players to 8 players. It's bounced around all in between there. So there's been a lot of changes to the AT. Like a giant revamp of it is definitely not a bad thing.
Well, again, going back to that question of what's its relationship to EVE Online. Now, what you were saying, Falcon, is it's an isolated arena, but that's not very open to people surprising you, except maybe doing, like PL used to do intel on the other teams and what they would normally bring.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's really more a tournament of theory crafting and execution.
Yeah, I mean, it's like and I don't want to impugn the work of so many people who put Elise included, who put incredible amounts of time into theory crafting and putting together fantastic comps for this thing. It's one of those situations where it is isolated. It's very controlled in terms of what you can bring to the arena. You've got a points value that governs exactly what you can bring. In fact, over the course of the last couple of years, the rules have been even more stringent, where you can only bring certain numbers of each class of hull, blah blah blah, various different things over the years. So it's it's entertainment. It's a spectacle. It's gladiatorial.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. People have a lust for blood in EVE. You can see that. And it's it's something that's been around since 2002. And I think that's a bloodlust that needs to be satisfied, and we're going to do our best to continue to do that. It's maybe it'll be different in future, maybe it won't. But
we should have human sacrifices too.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I'm not that barbaric, but well,
it'll just be a Vexer. We'll just destroy a Vexer to the gods.
I think you touched on something there when you said it's been going on since 2002. It's a way, like the game EVE Online is such an old game. The Alliance Tournament has always been a way for players to kind of like make their mark in the history of EVE, right? You get little medals. You get to talk about that time I participated in the Alliance Tournament. Like there are so many people that I've met in different groups, and even reading threads today saying, I had such a great interaction with the Alliance Tournament because I was just like this newbie flying around, and they picked me to be on the team, and I did some logistics work for them. And when my team won, I felt so great about it. And I got to tell everyone like, in Alliance Tournament, whatever, I did this, and I was part of the wins.
Yeah. So for those of us just joining us, for those people that are just joining us, I want to reintroduce Falcon and Elise. Both these guys don't need really an introduction because everybody's watching is probably a big fan. Everybody that will watch this video after it's made a VOD will know them. But Elise Randolph was an FC for Pandemic Legion and also worked with the tournament for many years. And Falcon, who works for CCP. It was also known as Verone, and he was an announcer for the early ATs Alliance tournaments way back in 2010, 2009, 2008, 10 years ago. So both these guys have had a lot to do with the Alliance tournament. And today the news is that the Alliance tournament they're going to take a hiatus this season. So there won't be an Alliance tournament, and they will return in the future. I don't think it's been determined when, but probably the next year. And one thing about the hiatus, is this the first time the Alliance tournament's taken a hiatus?
I can't actually remember. I think so, yeah. I think it's the first
don't
time in a while
remember
we've had it. I mean, we used to be in the position where we ran 2 Alliance tournaments a year. That was like really
Yeah.
early on, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we decided to go 1 per year. And it was basically like the annual gladiatorial spectacular kind of thing where people would blow the shit out of each other. Yeah, and I think this is the first time we've taken a hiatus. It's also the first time we've taken a hiatus from FanFest since 2010,
Yeah.
when we moved venues. We moved from
CCP headquarters to.
well, no, we moved. Well, actually, we didn't move venues. Sorry, in 2011, we stayed at Lurgus Hall, but we actually moved from hosting FanFest in the winter, which basically meant that half our attendees froze to death, to the spring, where the weather in Iceland is a little bit more defrosted, and you can actually walk without almost dying on the ice. So yeah, there's been various things where we've challenged sort of the cadence and the timing where we've done things over the years. We've done this with FanFest before. We're doing this with the AT now. There's various other things we might do. I mean, we might decide that we want to take a hiatus and do events at different times, or all manner of things. It's just,
Yeah.
it depends on the needs of what we want to do, what staff we have, and how we want to structure things.
Okay, so in the interest of making this more of a conversation between the three of us rather than me just interviewing you guys, when did CCP move, and it's just a little history here, from CCP headquarters or wherever it was that you had nearby CCP headquarters, FanFest, you moved that to Harpa. What year was that, or is that the same time you're talking about where you took a hiatus?
So the first FanFest, I might be completely wrong about this. The first couple of FanFest were hosted in the Nordico Hotel, which is now the Reykjavik Hilton, in the conference center there. I believe it was 2007 that we moved over to Lewis Hall, which is basically a sports center, like a basketball and soccer sports center. That's literally about a quarter to a half a mile away from the Reykjavik Hilton. And we hosted through there until 2012. And then in 2012, we moved from that place down to Harper because Harper had just been completed.
Right.
And since then, we've hosted from Harper, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so this is the first AT hiatus. I forget that you used to have 2 Alliance tournaments per year. That's a tall order.
And
It
then for
was
a while we had an Alliance Horn, and then like a different type of tournament called the New Eden Open, which I very famously captained the PL team into dead last. And then there was like another one that was like a cash money prize that wasn't for alliances. It was just groups of pilots with pilots form their own teams, regardless of the alliance they were in.
Mm-hmm. Elise, you're so good at running yourself down, and yet you do all these behind the scenes spectacular things. So I also wanted to go back to the Alliance tournament because I keep asking this question. And this is funny. I'll point out Chocolate Rain here, and I'm sure this is bait for me to read it out loud, and I'm going to take the bait.
I knew you were going to say the bait.
Matterall AT hater hosting a show about AT's death. Okay, a few things wrong with that statement. One is, it's not dead. 2 is, I'm not a hater. Actually, I'm a AT lover, and I was a big fan of it way back when I started the game. I actually went to work over a weekend so that I could watch it uninterrupted, and was sitting at my desk all weekend watching it. So I was a big fan of Alliance Tournament. So what I wanted but what's different, because I did slowly stop watching it or start to antagonize it because I felt I was left out of it. And I think that might be an experience that other people are having too, that they don't feel an attachment to it, which might account for some of the numbers dropping or people watching it.
Yeah, definitely that's a thing, because that's something I tried to tackle with EVNT when we were running our own like small tournaments. Is the question of what will make people interested in it, and the thing that comes back to it, or comes back, is they want to follow the storylines. They want to be able to understand what's going on. And the Alliance tournament in the form that it is in right now, for like the last 2 years, the rules are a little bit static, and so kind of the understanding and interpreting what's going on the field and on your screen, it's a little bit difficult for even like actual seasoned PvPers to really truly appreciate, right? Like, appreciating you making a certain judgment call is incredibly fascinating to like 100 to 500 people in the game. And to everyone else, it's, oh, that ship just exploded. Cool. What an idiot. They should have gone for the other ship. I would do this so much better. But it's like, it's so hard to follow and kind of keep track of the storylines and keep track of the personalities. And then there's always like this lingering thought in the back of your head, like, oh, these people must be cheating, or these people are colluding because of that one time where they got caught colluding, that one final where they got in trouble. Yeah. So like, oh, screw this. This is so dumb. I don't want to watch this. My team lost.
Well, a couple questions. What are the things that actually electrify an audience, though? Isn't it like, first of all, the flagships, because they're special. But remember when the really special ships came out, the really rare ships? Those are things that are easy to understand, right? Like, that ship is worth more than all the other ships combined on the field. I'm thinking of, who's the guy that brought out the APOC? I think it was the...
Rame Severe Alliance Tournament 3 was when the Impoc died. And I still remember to this day watching that live and almost having an aneurysm when I saw that thing get destroyed. Like, it was unprecedented. It always is.
Were you announcing fantastic. That one?
No, that was the tournament before I got involved. That was AT3, so that was the year before I actually started casting for Alliance Tournament.
Okay. Yeah, those are okay. So this is what I'm getting at. Like, the Alliance Tournament, it needs to have a connection with the audience. And one of the ways I imagine you do that is cheering for your team, right? Like, you don't have to play for a soccer team. You just need to live in the city. So you don't have to play in the tournament. You just need to belong to that alliance or be allied with that alliance or respect them in some way, or you have to find something to cheer for.
Yeah, and it's not only cheering for your own team, it's also like hating the other guys that are playing your team. Like, that is a huge part of like sports rivalries, and it's a huge part of what would make a version of a Alliance tournament, something like that, really successful, is not only rooting for your team, but rooting super hard against the guys that your team hates, like the other guys, the bad guys.
Yeah, you want to see them go down.
Eve is very much a game where people would rather watch their enemies lose than to win.
Yeah, it's just about giving the middle finger to people you don't like. That's the main thing. Like, it's incredibly strange, but yeah, I mean, it's a very much a mentality of, if I go down, I'm taking you with me. Like, and it's fun to watch, definitely.
So this thing about esports and Eve, I see that it takes a lot of well, does it really? Does it take a lot of experience piloting to not necessarily to go into the tournament, but to really function as a member of a good tournament team? Not just anybody, but a good tournament team?
As a pilot, you generally have to have a good rapport with the people you're flying with. You don't have to be like an all-star pilot. You don't have to be like the Chessers of the world or anything like that. But if you, essentially, the thing that makes Alliance tournament fans so insane and crazy is because they spend 4 months together, 3 or 4 months together, flying together 30 hours a week.
Oh.
And you just build a camaraderie with the people you're flying with, and you know what you're supposed to do before being told how to do it. And so you don't need to be like a good pilot to do that. You just have to know what you're flying, understand it completely, like inside and out, and your body just kind of goes on autopilot. And that's one of the really neat things about flying in the Alliance tournament that makes it so different from other aspects of like Eve's PvP.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, if you're a bomber pilot, you're a vigil pilot or whatever, you have the ability to understand the ship, and you have the intuition to know when the ship is going to be effective, how it's going to be effective, and when to utilize its effectiveness during a match. Like, you don't need to have the big picture. You just need to be able to have that intuition and be able to respond to when you're being told what to do by a team captain. That's the main thing.
So you have to be familiar enough with the equipment and with the situation to respond quickly, and also to do some of your own piloting when you know there's something that you should be doing at the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the because I think one of the things that happens is that we look at the top tier teams. I hear this all the time. It's like the same teams are winning over and over again, and since they win, they get the really expensive ships, which makes them inherently rich and wealthy and able to win the tournament again. And what do you think of that argument?
Well, it doesn't work too much anymore because the rules got changed to make it so I think top 6 or top 8 teams, I think it's top 6, get the Alliance Tournament prize ship. And after that rule came out and after that change came out, you saw a lot more competition for the top tier moniker, right? So instead of it being 2 or 3 teams, it became 4 or 5 teams with a Cinderella story seemingly every year coming out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My favorite Cinderella story again was AT7. Was it 7? It was 6 it was 6, where RUR came out and was fighting against
Jesus.
Pandemic Legion. You guys have memory of that?
Mm-hmm. I remember this well.
And I think part of the reason it was such a big deal, Falcon, is because you were hyping it so well. These guys are the underdog. Who are they? They're up from nowhere.
I mean, if there's anything I know how to do, matter
Hype.
shit. So it's it's one of those things. I've always been adept at this, and it's good to drum up hype. And the main thing that I wanted to do is, like, I've spoken with so many teams, so many captains over the years, and I've seen what goes on behind the scenes in the organization of the tournament, but I've also seen how much effort the teams put into it. And myself and God were actually talking about this. We're talking about this with a few other people as well, that it would be a hideous disservice of us to actually have sort of not talked about this so far in advance. I mean, it's February now. We're probably starting to March, April. We'd be looking at signups. Probably May we'd be looking at rules release. June, July we'd be looking at like final practice, and then as we go in towards sort of early fall, we'd be looking at the tournament itself. And we just wanted to get this news out of the door early because we understand the commitment that people put into this. I mean, this is, as Elise said, it's like 30 hours a week. It goes on for months where people practice for this. And we already had a couple of people who were more on the hardcore spectrum of wanting to start practicing early and wanting to know about rule sets, who were like, hey, what's going on with the AT this year? What's happening? We want to know more. And it's best for us to get a piece of news like this out super early, even if it's blunt, even if it's a little bit savage, even if it annoys some people as well. It's best for us to be transparent about this stuff and get it out early rather than, people booking time off work, people taking time out of their schedules, people starting to practice based on like last year's rule set. And then, suddenly in May or June, we say, hey guys, we're taking a hiatus from the AT this year, like 2 months before people were expecting it to be a thing. Like, that would be 100% unacceptable for us to do. So that's why we tried to get out ahead of it a little bit early and just be super honest and frank with people that, we've got a lot of things that we want to consider for the AT going forward. We've also got a lot of other priorities this year. And we just want to make sure that when the AT does roll around again, that it's going to be the best it can possibly be.
Yeah, and that's a big thing that you pointed out about wanting to tell people as early as possible, because it is something that people take seriously. Like, I know some people were already talking about it. Even last week on Talking in Stations, we had CCP Fozzy on, and there were like 3 or 4 people in chat who the only thing they cared about was knowing when the Alliance tournament was going to come and when the rules were going to be announced, because they wanted to take time off work and they wanted to like make plans for it.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. So you needed to get that news out so they didn't waste a bunch of time trying to prepare for something that wasn't going to happen this year.
I mean, as well as that, it's super ugly for us, like, internally as well. If we're sort of like, if we know that we're in a position where we're not going to host this year, we don't say anything about it. We leave it and we leave it and we leave it, and then we end up with people who are even more angry and disappointed down the line. It's best to be
Sure.
just transparent and honest about things. And like, to be brutally honest, we've got a hell of a lot going on this year. There's a lot of plans. There's a lot of stuff coming on the world tour. There's a lot of stuff that we've just got planned in general for 2019. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense for us just to exhale a little bit, reassess what we want to do with the AT, and then move forward from there. And
Yeah,
oh my god, there are some walls of text in chat I'm just reading. But yeah, it's the one thing that I really like, though. I know this is horribly morbid for me to say it, and people will probably want to stab me in the face with something, but the fact that people got so vocal about it, both on the forums and on r/eve, really shows us that it's something that there is a core in our community that really value this and are super passionate about it. And if anything, that just further incentivizes us to make things better, to make sure that we support things better. Yeah, I mean, it's although the rage is like, oh my god, put the news out and everyone's angry, or a subset of people are angry. It's reassuring to know that people really, really care about this.
Yeah.
And it's nice to know that sort of that legacy that's gone on for more than a decade is still pretty strong in people's hearts as well.
Yeah, I was thinking of pulling the plug on Talking in Stations just suddenly, and then bringing it back a month later.
That'd be pretty funny, to be honest, and super trolly.
And see what happens. Yeah. Yeah, I probably would just make a lot of people angry. That happens because people care about it. You know, you may not know it till it's kind of missing, and then you're like, "Hey, I really wanted to invest in that." But I actually wanted to, and so for those of you joining us, a few more people joined up. This is CCP Falcon and Elise Randolph. You know who they are. This is about Alliance Tournament. One of the things I wanted to do, if we could, is turn back the clock and go back to the early Alliance tournaments and kind of walk through the progression of Alliance tournaments, by memory. So we'll see how well we do.
That's rough.
Yeah, I'll start, and if we forget, we'll just try this because again, we have.
I was very drunk for most of them, so.
Were you? But the first, and just throw in wherever you can, the first Alliance tournament actually wasn't an Alliance tournament. It was the CCP. Sorry, it was the Caldari Championships, wasn't it?
Yep.
Like that.
If you want to go back further than that, we actually had the Omar Championships in 2003 that decided.
I don't count those because those were religious.
Those were okay.
Yeah.
So
I also don't count those because I lost. So
were you in the first one?
Maybe you should just get good, and then you wouldn't have this problem.
Ouch. At least you weren't in the first trials.
No, that was before my time. But in the second one, I lost to role players.
If you go back to the old CCP releases of news way back in 2003, you can see that the first tournament or the first Amar Championships actually happened, I believe, in 2003. So it was it was the same year that the game launched. It was really early on.
Absolutely.
And it seems really interesting because you've created this virtual world. You've put it out there. That started in May 2003. And then by the fall, you have a tournament that's actually changing the face of the game. Like it was very interesting that early on they were saying the players are going to be part of the DNA of this game. They're going to change the path of the future.
I mean, we were doing esports before esports was a thing. Like this is the funny part about it. I mean, we were streaming the Alliance tournament before YouTube was a thing, before the ill-fated On3D was a thing, before Twitch was a thing. And it's something that we've just done because we know that our community enjoys it, and it's always a spectacle. And yeah, I mean, like, I remember the Caldari Championships. I remember AT2. I remember AT3 when the infamous power failure happened during a thunderstorm, which is like, it's unheard of. Yeah, it's unheard of for there to actually be a thunderstorm in Iceland, but we friggin' had one right during a broadcast, of course. And yeah, I think it cut us out for about 15 minutes. Then AT4 was like was just crazy. It was like It was hosted from a studio apartment that we rented like across the street from the CCP offices, because the CCP offices had just been partially finished, and we just moved into the building that we're in right now, and there was like jackhammering going on the fourth floor and the third floor. Well, the fourth floor was the roof; it didn't exist. The third floor was being jackhammered to create channels for Cat5 trunking, so that we actually put network infrastructure in the floor. So people were like, working at their desks on the second floor with umbrellas and tarpaulins over their computers to stop the dust and the water from getting into them. It was very ghetto. And 84, then 85 actually moved into the basement of the building that CCP is in right now in Grandegatter, and that was we were based in there, and we were in the ground floor that is now the Viken. Then 86 was across the street in the building that's now like the Aurora Museum, the Icelandic Saga Museum. So yeah, there's been so many different places that we've hosted the AT over the years, but we've always managed to find a way to get it out there,
That's amazing. So you were you never had the same situation twice.
Yeah. It's been we've always been in different places here and there. I mean, I think I can't remember which AT it was. God, it was when we got into the double figures. It was maybe 11, 10, 11, or 12. We actually hosted in a studio owned by RÚV, which is basically the Icelandic National Broadcasting Centre. So effectively the BBC of Iceland. We hosted in one of their studios. And then over the years, we've had a fantastic contractor called Kuk, who are basically a video and audio production crew from Iceland, who did a lot of contracting work. They've done all kinds of movie work. And those guys helped us out so much over the course of like a decade, assisting. They've also assisted us with FanFest and FanFest broadcasts too. So yeah, there's so much stuff that goes into it over the course of the year.
So
And
the early ones, who built the set? Because you guys did have like a big desk.
Oh, we built the set. It was even like you can see on stream right now, that wonderful blue desk that is on stream right now. That was actually built by a contractor to CCP, a guy who does work. But underneath that desk is actually a motorized height adjustable IKEA desk. It's just a frame from an IKEA desk that we can raise and lower at will, with a few colored LEDs in the front of it and a little bit of a dress over the top of it. As with any broadcasting set, inside the frame is always beautiful, and then outside the frame is the most ghetto thing in the world, where there's like cable ties and Velcro holding everything together.
I remember for the props for some of the early ones, it was like you had done it. CCP at the time, Stevie SG had built some stuff, and CCP Affinity had also done like a bunch of stuff for the sets.
Absolutely. I remember 84 or 85. I can't remember which one it was. Getting there, and at the time, I mean, historically, before I came to CCP, I was a robotic engineer and an electrical engineer. And we got there, and it was like, oh, none of the lighting on the desk is working, like none of the lighting around here is working. Give me 20 minutes and I'll fix it. And I literally just went into electrical engineering and started like working on lighting and AV equipment. And I'm like, yeah, I was just here to talk about spaceships, and now apparently I'm just doing the job that I do when I'm at home as well. So it was like, and it's always been one of those things where people have just pitched in. It's been a huge passion project, and people have always loved it. It's a great fun.
And I think that's the important part for people worrying about the future of the Alliance tournament, is the fact that it's been so ghetto and so wild for the last few years. It's like existed solely because of the amazing passion of the people at CCP for running the Alliance tournament. Like, I know the huge jumps in quality in terms of matches. All of it happened because there are a few new mechanics for training. Either it used to be a locked system, or then a dedicated trading server, and all this good stuff, and new different tools and stuff. All that came because someone on their spare time was just like, hey, this would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Let me do this.
I
It
mean,
wasn't
it's
like in the budget. It wasn't like anything like
yeah.
that. So people are there's so much doom and gloom. Is oh the AT is dead because CCB don't care about it anymore. It's not getting new players, so it's not profitable. Like yeah, it's spoiler alert. I'm pretty sure it's never been profitable.
It is like we have always ran the Alliance tournament at a net loss. Like shock horror, like shock horror. The community team in most companies runs as a net loss. We are a cost. Like that is the way that it works. Like you think that the money for FanFest or the money to send people out to play gatherings just magically comes from somewhere? No, it doesn't. It's all part of a budget and it's carefully calculated to make sure that it works and that it gives return on investment. And guess what? The fact that we work on stuff like this gives us return on investment in terms of community sentiment. It's fantastic to see people so happy. I put this news out today, and I knew 100% that people were going to be upset. It was like it's time. It's kind of I have this thing in the office where whenever bad news is going out, I'm just like, well, it's time to kick this bitch out of the bomb bay and see what happens. Basically, like that's my view on things.
The Bombay.
Like it's kick the bitch out of the bomb bay and see what happens. Like, we're and we've got to see how things go. And occasionally this happens where we've just got to put something out that we know is going to be negatively received. That's just life. That's how it goes. And I knew this was going to be something that would be negatively received by a proportion of the community, and it was something that would generate a lot of discussion, a lot of negativity, and a lot of craziness. And that's just how it is. You've got to let people be upset now and again. You've got to let people vent. You've got to let people be upset because it's something that people are very passionate about. And yeah, it's one of those things you've got to deal with. But it's and funnily enough, the reason that I'm up so late, it's 3:36 in the morning.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, Matt, full of whiskey. I was actually out for dinner a little bit earlier tonight with Hilmar, CCP Hilmar, our CEO, and a few of the guys from the communications team and the community team over here in Iceland. And one of the things that I was literally directly talking about when the Alliance tournament came up and when FanFest came up was the importance of heritage and the importance of culture and the importance of preserving history in EVE Online and how we should do more to make sure that we preserve and document stuff and that that stuff that happens because of a little bit of pomp and ceremony and the fact that it's traditional. Stuff like the FanFest pub crawl or the keynote or CCP presents or doing specific things at Vegas each year. Like it's all part of heritage, and when you hear old veterans talk about, oh, I remember the FanFest pub crawl from 2009 or something. You get a lot of people who turn up in 2018, 2019, 2020, and they're like, I want to be a part of that. I want to do what I've heard all the stories about. And it becomes sort of like almost a rite of passage for newer players. And I think absolutely the Alliance tournament is very much a thing the same. It's part of the heritage, it's part of the history, it's part of the culture of what makes New Eden so great and what gels our community together.
I can
From
imagine. I can imagine that people come looking for that thing to commune with. If they go to FanFest or whatever, like they have heard about it, they're coming to commune with it, and it seems to me, not to interrupt you, but I did interrupt you. The Alliance tournament used to be a place that we kind of communed with behind the scenes Eve, because they made announcements. CCP did, and there was a lot of discussion between the fights, and you had devs on and you talked to them about the work. I don't know if that ever changed, but I wonder if that sort of connection was not as visible as it used to be.
Yeah, I think maybe that's the case in a sense. I mean, there's something actually that Bananmas just posted in chat that I actually really want to talk about. He mentioned like when I was talking about the community team being a cost for any company, and he says that it's not that simple. A community team or something like the AT improves retention, and even though it looks like it's just a cost at first glance, it does contribute to a company's revenue and the bottom line. And you're absolutely right. And in the earlier days of CCP, I think like many other companies, CCP was guilty of seeing the community team as a sunken cost that just is a thing. And I think to this day, a lot of other development studios actually do that. It's like These guys don't bring any money in, so we've just got to deal with the fact that we need community management, and that's it. For as long as I've worked at CCP and for many years before, CCP has always accepted the fact that yes, while it costs to have a community team, while it costs to have a department running community, and while it costs to have people sat talking to your players all day, the fact of the matter is that one of the things that, regardless of whether you feel it's good or bad, or whether you feel that our community management is great or terrible, one of the things that CCP has always strived to do is to be as close to its players as possible. And that's why you have people like myself, people like God, people like Fozzie, random members of our development team who will happily come on shows like Talking in Stations. They'll dive on podcasts. They'll jump onto unofficial platforms like Reddit or Discord or whatever, and they'll have it out and they'll talk with people, then interact with people, and they'll get involved in discussion about the game, about balance, about whatever. Because guess what? We're not afraid to actually talk to our players. We've spent 15 years building an incredible virtual world with you guys. There's so much history and so much heritage around Eve that we're incredibly proud of it, even though there's been their ups and downs over the course of the last decade and a half. It's one of those things that we just accept and we embrace it. And 100% we try and dive in as much as possible and discuss with people.
So yeah, going back to what we were, how do I transition this? Well, first of all, that's very well said, and it is an investment. I think one of the things that people must know about EVE Online, even if you know nothing else, is it's been around for a long time. And I think it's been around a long time because there's a stability of certain players that have invested into the game and are just tied to it. I keep thinking of playing other games, and then I'm like, that'll take too long, and I don't want to be that far away from EVE Online. So
I've tried and failed. I really have.
I
yeah,
think that's a common experience. But yeah, there's just a lot of history and investment in the game, and it's a virtual world where you can really do a lot of the things that you want to do in other games. You can kind of do in this game, so there's not really that strong a draw. Plus, again, everything's real and everything has value. Also makes you kind of want to stick with Eve. So. What I meant to get to was that communion thing that we were talking about earlier, where people belong to this game and actually shape it too. That it seems like there was the ceremony around the tournament. I don't know if it seems different or if I've just outgrown the tournament. If the tournament has become so specifically niche that it doesn't appeal to people who are explorers, for instance, or something like that. And I don't know if that's just my experience or if that's something a little more widespread.
Honestly, I think the biggest part of it was not being able to interact with the tournament so much, like through EveBet or any other like a betting thing. So you had no way as like a line member to be like, hey, I am putting myself out there. I am invested in what's going on. It's just like, oh, I'll watch a few minutes of this 8-hour long broadcast this weekend. I'm not going to sit and watch Eve for 8 hours because I'm going to also be playing Eve for 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll watch the finals and you'll be like, oh, I don't know who these dudes are. I don't care. I don't remember how they got here. Blah, blah, blah. But meanwhile, and I'm not saying like, oh, AT has to be successful only if there's betting. That's not it at all, right? But that's kind of what you're getting at is you're kind of growing apart from it, and a lot of other people grow away from it too because there's just no way for a non-player or a non online tournament pilot to interact with it. And kind of the opposite thing happens in terms of the people who actually did participate. Like they got closer, they put more work into it because the competition got harder and harder and harder. And it's kind of like a kick in the stomach to them today because they're like, oh man, I wanted to work so hard at this thing, and now it's gone. It's probably gone forever. Oh, I hate everything. So they just get very very dramatic.
So there's a couple of things. I mean, firstly, it's and I don't want to play the fucking sympathy game here because I was part of the group that made the decision to take a hiatus for the Alliance tournament, but Jesus Christ, it was painful putting the news out today that we've been taking a hiatus for a year. I've been working on this shit for more than a decade, and it's one of those things where you try and word it as softly as you can. You try and be you try at least be mildly sensitive to the fact that people are going to be pretty friggin' angry about the fact that you're putting things on hiatus for a year, but for the sanctity, the safety, and the well-being of the project, it just has to be done. And then, you look at, I think you're completely right, Elise. You look at the sort of the dynamic that's developed in the tournament over the last few years, and there's a few key issues. There's the fact that, for various technical reasons, for other reasons as well, the rule set has only been tweaked and changed a little bit, so it's left tournaments being a little bit samey the last couple of times around. We'll absolutely admit to that. So we've had very, very similar finalists for the last few years, and I'll wholeheartedly admit that the fact that we shut down I Want ISK, and then we also said that eBet can no longer operate. Really, really puts a damper on things when you can't actually gamble on the outcome of a sport. I mean, effectively, what you're looking at is, yes, you're looking at an esport, a very niche one that's only understood by a small group of people, but a small group of people with a hell of a lot of disposable income within the game ecosystem who would bet on it if they could. And that's part of the fun. I mean, that's part of the risk when you're not when you're not a jockey and you're not in a horse race. The next best thing is being able to put your money on who you think's going to win. And yeah, maybe it's something that we might look at in the future. You never know. Might be something that we look at for next tournament. Might be something we look at 5 years down the line. But it's something that we're very aware of, and we know that it changed the tournament ecosystem.
So what you're saying then is that maybe there might be a possibility of there being some kind of betting system in the game to play. I'm not putting words in your mouth. That's just in the realm of possibilities. It can be looked at.
Honestly, I would 100% never commit to anything because that is such a hideous gray area. But
Yeah.
I mean, the ability to bet on Alliance tournament matches was something historically that people absolutely loved, and when there
Yeah.
were services like EveBet out there who were doing it, it was great for engagement. And I mean, if it was a lot more simple, people could bet their risk responsibly, I'm sure we'd be fine with it. But you've got to really
Yeah.
think about it, and there's a lot of facets to understand when you consider it.
Yeah. I don't know. Betting kind of reminds me of like Vegas and a smoky room and ashtrays, and just like, for me, it's not for me. But for me, the way to get attached to the tournament was to cheer for a team that I wanted to win. So a team that I belonged to, or a team that I was allied with. And I know the announcers do a good job trying to make sure that you know their story and who they're with, and talk a little bit about the corporations and stuff like that.
Yeah, it is. It is such a tricky thing to kind of someone who has done commentating and announcing for it. It's so hard because you have to walk this line, because the people that are watching and interested don't need every little bit explained to them. But there are like some things that you have to explain, or there's some things that you have to kind of go out there and say, oh, by the way, you probably didn't notice this, but this guy hits this guy. These guys used to fly together, and this guy betrayed him, and all this other random information.
That's
And
the rich stuff
on top of trying to explain what's actually going on in space, and trying to also figure out what's going on in space so you can then process it and tell people what's going on in space.
Well, that's the thing. I think the story was the better hook for people who don't really know how tough a move that was to make, unless they're told that was a tough move to make. So the stories of rivalries and that kind of stuff seem to bring more hooks for lay people.
And I think a big portion of it is, so obviously, like, I'm sure Falcon can attest to this. When you post anything, there's going to be a lot of rage no matter what, because people on the internet are just unhappy. That's just a facet of the internet.
Malcontents.
But when cooler heads kind of prevail in the morning or later in the week after they get over it, I think a lot of people who are very passionate about the Alliance tournament are going to be kind of relieved a little bit, because they're going to be able to say, at least we're not going to have like a shitty Alliance tournament. I'd rather have a good Alliance tournament and wait a year than have a shitty Alliance tournament. Obviously, I'd like to have a good Alliance tournament every year, but we're not living in a fairy tale world where we can just snap our fingers and make everything happen all the time, right? So I think a lot of people, they're just worried for no reason, because they like to be doom and gloom. I don't know. It's something about the last 3 or 4 years.
Wow. Elise, it's bizarre. It's almost like you're being a civil human being. What the hell?
I know it's not allowed.
It's I think you should take that back and just be really irrationally angry.
I'm unsubbing all 100 of my accounts until there's an
Yeah,
alliance tournament.
absolutely. That's the way forward. Clearly.
Quite a spy network you have, Elise.
Yeah.
By the way, I did hear that you had created a bunch of alphas and you were kind of growing them. Did you ever deploy them to different places?
I have like 4 or 5. It was down from the initial number, but dude, someone in chat asked if I'm subbed. I got a PvP kill today, in fact.
What's that? The first time you've logged in like the last 3 years or something?
That's a lot. I'm shockingly active.
It's good. It's good, man. It's good.
Okay, one last attempt. So we made it through about AT 6 or 7. Let me do a broad strokes because it's hard and nearly impossible to go through all the alliance tournaments and stuff. But essentially, early on, the people who were really dominant in the tournaments were kind of people who were dominant in the game.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, Sov-wise at least.
Yeah, Band of Brothers. Actually, TWD was the alliance tournament captain / main theory crafter. There's like this huge like aura around him in the alliance tournament circles.
Yeah.
One of the theory crafters is like, yeah, TWD is actually chess grandmaster, and that's why he made this unbeatable team. And he's like just amazing and kind of a god.
Hold on. Was this the unbeatable Bob setup that was beaten by 10 thoraxes?
Yeah, that's the one. That's the exact one.
Oh, you stole the punchline, Falcon. But
No,
they make this impossible team, and it survived. Was it the same setup for 3 different alliance tournaments, or did it evolve?
It was they basically ran the same loadout through the entire of, I believe it was Alliance Tournament 4, and then got knocked out in the semi-finals by Jericho Fraction with 10 thoraxes. It was unbelievable.
And who was Jericho Fraction?
They were it was actually Star Fraction because of the
Star
Alliance
Fraction,
tournament.
yes.
It was yeah.
Jericho Fraction was a notable alliance.
They were an old anarchist role-playing group. Fantastic group of guys and girls.
Yeah. Lost to role players.
Role players will
it's almost as bad as losing to like Moses Mihi or something.
So that was early on. So the dominant people in the game dominated the tournament too, and it was kind of icing on the cake, saying, we're good at this game because we dominate this space, and we're proving it here because we can dominate the arena.
The thing is, though, and this is not always the case. There's been one exception to that rule, and I want to point this out because a very good friend of mine actually coming to the CSM summit this weekend, and he's probably going to slap me and buy me a beer when I remind him of this. But Bob were obviously very dominant in terms of Sov. They did fantastically. And then PL were very dominant in terms of their military power. They did fantastically in the Alliance tournament. And the people who wiped out Bob, Goonswarm Federation, who now actually own Delve and run the Imperium, have always been notoriously shit at the tournament. So this isn't always the case that people who are really good at EVE are actually good at the tournament. And I just wanted to point that out because historically, although they've been really good militarily recently and they've been really solid running the Imperium, GSF have actually historically been quite terrible at the Alliance tournament. And it's something that I know many members of Goonswarm actually are fairly open about and laugh about.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Goon Alliance tournament stories is when they sent their bid to the wrong alliance, and they were shocked when they weren't included into the Alliance tournaments because they thought you have to send like a bid back in the day. You have to send a bid to the CCP Alliance in game. You just set a contract with your Plex that you want to bid to get in. And Goonswarm did this, but they sent it to some other alliance that had CCP in the start of its name, but it wasn't the official CCP alliance.
Oh. I can't remember what the exact situation was. Yeah, but I think there was some skullduggery involved. But yeah, I mean, like it's it's the same with Test. I mean, Test have always been fantastic. In terms of just their morale, how they behave, the group of people that they are, what they do. Like, Test members are some of the most wonderful people I've ever met when I've gone to a real world player gathering. and they do pretty well militarily in the game right now, although they do it in kind of a half-assed kind of sport brain kind of way.
Last year they did.
But yeah, I mean they've been also notoriously quite terrible at Alliance tournament, but they still managed to get by. You know what I mean? So it's not always a case of the guys who are good at Sov are good at AT, but there are some outliers definitely. PL and Bob were definitely two
But
outliers.
this was especially true in the beginning, and then the domination of the tournament switched pretty much after one season. There was a middle winner there. I think it was
Yeah.
it wasn't Ronin. It was
I mean, there's been a few really, really small groups or relatively small groups that have won AT that have been really good. I mean, the first one for me that was the really, really big shock. I can't remember what AT it was, but it was Hun Reloaded who won.
Hun. Yeah.
And they were at the time. Those guys were tiny, bunch of Hungarian guys who were just like, yeah, we're gonna have fun in the AT, and then they came out on top and won a shitload of money, and it's like, great, all power to you guys. You know what I mean? They had a fantastic time of it.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's been a few times that's happened.
that tournament I think was 4, and what was happening was I believe Pandemic Legion was started to exist, and it started to become very powerful, and it was starting to win in the Alliance tournament. So there was supposed to be a Pandemic Legion versus Bob fight, but I think that they got knocked out by.
God, I can't even remember when the overlap happened. It's so long ago in my
I'm
brain.
pretty sure he got knocked out by Evoke for the longest time. PL and
yeah,
Evoke.
Evoke,
which is another small kind of just group based around a bunch of Germans playing EVE Online.
Yeah, Germans.
Like just an ethnic little groups tend to do really well in the Alliance tournament for whatever reason.
Their descendants are lumpy right now, I think.
Yeah, there's so many old names as well when you think about it. That like,
yeah,
that just and of course the legend of Solar Fleet who became Solar Feet when we accidentally misspelled them in the tournament tool for an entire tournament. So like, there's been much legacy and much misspelled legacy over the years as well. So it's wonderful. It's lovely to see.
But yeah, I was talking about it's like in the when I was talking about the Alliance tournament. If you are a fan of the Alliance tournament for the last 5 or 6 years, if you look at some of the early Alliance tournaments, it's almost unrecognizable. They're completely different, and the change kind of happened around Alliance tournaments. Alliance Tournament 7 is when they did the like the 50 cruisers, 50 frigate sort of prize structure. That's when that whole prize thing started, and that's kind of where we are today. Like that has run its course, and that's when the Alliance tournament kind of changed into like the modern day Alliance tournament. And I'd even take that one step further. Like the golden age of tournaments happened after Alliance Tournament 10, when we got so many new tools as players to practice and train and do all this stuff and just get ready and prepare for the tournament. And you can see like there's this huge gap or this huge jump in skill between Alliance Tournament 10 and the previous ones and Alliance Tournament 11 and onwards. And Alliance Tournament 11, if you are a fan of this at all, or if you want to reminisce, the Alliance Tournament 11 finals are probably the best finals of any, or as good of finals for any esport thing that I can find. It's Pandemic Legion versus Hydra. It's a best of 5 that goes to all 5 games. The final like match is between literally just 2 players duking it out. It has literally every aspect of great storytelling and great fun that you could get out of it. And that's just a testament to like the rules changed a little bit, and there was some internal buy-in to make some tools to facilitate how the Alliance tournament is run and for the players and make it a little bit easier for them. PL1, 7, and 11, and I was in both of them. I was actually the only pilot from PL's team to lose in Alliance Tournament 7. I was like really happy because I thought we won, and I was flossing a little bit, and then I got shot and died without broadcasting. And Seamus and Gobbins both yelled at me nonstop for the entirety of the match for dying, and I died to Gig X, by the way.
Jesus Christ.
I was muted. Yeah, so 7 and 11 were the ones that I remember as well, and you were in both those. Those are great ones. Um, how much damage? How much damage did the scandals from the tournament hurt the tournament, if at all? And if you
It's,
want to know what those scandals were, there was a few. Um, one of them was that there was some. Um, I don't know. The Hydra was basically at the very end, instead of having a climactic fight in the last game, they were up against their sparring partner, and they just kind of threw it, or their sparring partner threw it to them or something. And so basically, the end game was fixed, the championship match. So that wasn't. I think people were a little bit upset about that. And there have been other scandals as well. There were people who just made some. Well, I won't go through them because they're really kind of distasteful, but there's been some scandals and there's been some, it's kind of tarnished the tournament a little bit. But how much do you think it's actually worn on it, or were they seen as outliers?
Honestly, I think. Oh, sorry. Go.
no, go for it, man. Go for it.
I was
Your
gonna say.
opinion is more valid than mine. I'm biased because I'm CCP.
I think after I think it's Alliance Tournament 12, which they seems to be retroactively disqualified the two teams that were like caught colluding. I think after that, it's kind of just been a lingering thought in the back of a lot of viewers' minds. And
Yeah.
it's, of course, EVE players are super trolly in their nature. So it didn't really help at all when Vidra Reloaded and Hydra Reloaded were playing one another in the finals for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
That definitely kind of, when you're watching that finals and you've got no buy-in because they're both really small roaming groups on Tranquility that don't have like a huge alliance backing. When you see the finals and it's Hydra versus Vidra, and you're like, huh, remember that time people were colluding? This kind of seems a little bit colludy. Like, regardless of if they did or not, and I'm assuming they didn't, but regardless of the fact, like, it definitely is a lingering thought. You're like, well, my team's not in it, but at least I can watch, oh, these two guys with basically the same name play. That's a little bit weird, and they're taking the exact same setups. Man, this is kind of weird.
Yeah.
And it definitely takes some wind out of the sails of the excitement for the whole thing. And you can't even hype it up too much either.
Well, those okay. So if I look at things that have kind of turned me off to the tournament, one of them would be that feeling like the fix is kind of in. Not necessarily that the winners perpetuate winners because they get all the prizes from the game. It's more in terms of these guys are talking to each other and working things out and throwing the game kind of, because that's what happened early on. The other thing that kind of bothers me, or I don't know, did you want to comment on the scandals, Falcon?
I always love to comment on scandal and terrible skullduggery. Yeah, I mean, like, collusion has always been a thing that's been in the back of our heads, and this is entirely right. I mean, the first time we've acted on it was, I think it was, yeah, it was. I can't remember which AT it was, but yeah, we, Elise rightly mentioned, we kicked a couple of people in the teeth retroactively. And that's something that we'll always continue to do going forward. I mean, just for the sanctity and the goodness of the sport. But I mean, there's every major sport. There's always allegations of dope and match fix and all kinds of stuff from from minor league stuff right up until to the Olympics. There's always allegations that people are messing around and doing things that are illegal. If we can act on it, we will. And if we can slap people around, then it's always a pleasure to do so. It's just a case of having the right evidence to be able to take care of it. In that instance, we did.
Yeah, but do you think it hurts the viewership at all?
Absolutely, I think it always has an impact.
Mm.
I think sort of one of the things, in all honesty, the last couple of tournaments when I've seen like Hydra Vidra finals, I've always been like, oh, can someone who has a different name just please get through to the finals, and it would feel more fun to watch. Like, it is always something that, like, it's always worrying in the back of your head that it's like it's just like team A and team B basically. Um so yeah, I mean, absolutely,
Yeah.
it's something that you have to consider.
What about the names of groups? I see a lot of, and this is another thing that's bothered me, and I don't know if it's just an excuse because a group like Skill Yourself beat Northern Coalition. Um, But the fact that it's called Skill Yourself, which obviously is kill yourself, right? And they're trying to get the announcers to say that over and over again when they're announcing, like that kind of meta meme going on. I have to admit, my kid's not going to watch this tournament with me, because penis out, skill yourself, just let it happen. That's a little, he probably won't.
Welcome to EVE Online. If there's one place on find a high concentration of edgelords, it's going to be in New Eden. That's just the way that it is. And as as the guy who is effectively like the community manager for CCP, I deal with this on a daily, near sometimes hourly basis when people make stupid alliance names or submit stupid alliance logos that are completely like in total breach of copyright or common sense. This happens all of the time because people in EVE with very little rules will always try to push the boundaries, and it's just something you have to do. You've just got to deal with it.
But every once in a while, you get like a really wholesome one, and my favorite wholesome one, there are two actually. One was a group, an alliance called Cube Alliance, which was literally just a dude who multi-boxed 8 clients trying to do anything. And then the other one was the alliance. They were just I's and L's over and over again. So it was just like we called them Barcode Alliance, just because it was just this wall of straight lines that is completely unpronounceable.
Is that part of it? Is that part of the community? Like, of course it is, but is it part of EVE is to allow some of that to happen without clamping down on it? Or
so one of the biggest things that I love about EVE is expression and the ability to have a little bit more fun with what you do and how you identify in the game. And when I look at backstory, I've had this conversation with with some of our artists internally, with people who are like, my God, or just generally with people all over the company and publicly as well, and players as well, who are like, oh my God, why the hell did you let that Alliance logo get through? And it's like, I'm sorry, but this is a game that is, if you want to start talking backstory and lore, is set 21,000 years into the future. Every single person who is competing in a tournament or who is part of an alliance is effectively like richer than the richest person on Earth. I'm very sorry, but you're in a position where you effectively have a demigod who is controlling a group of people. If this guy wants his logo, his banner that people fly under, to be like a huge, massive, fat bee or a phage or some random crappy squiggles that look like they were drawn by a 5-year-old, then that's what they get to have. That if a guy effectively wants to dive into his hangar and paint his 1.2 kilometer long apocalypse bright pink, why the hell not? You know what I mean? And I've always been to the point as well where I'm the same mind of relax and colors on skins to that effect. In terms of letting people express identity, I think it's fantastic, and it's something that as a sandbox game we should be embracing.
So it's interesting. So you're saying they're role playing demigods; they can do anything they want, and so then
within certain sensible preset parameters, yes.
Until the EULA hits.
There's obviously, yeah, exactly. We've always got the reality of our terms of service, but within reason, I don't think there's anything out of the ordinary about having a little bit of trolley fun with people and giving stupid alliance names that are going to cause problems for commentators to pronounce when they're cast. I mean, it's just one of those.
Yeah, and you guys find a way around it, as at least you were saying the Barcode Alliance was not pronounceable. So you
exactly, and Skill Yourself ended up being called Skill You. It's one of those things where we just we use better judgment and tried a little bit more sensitive about the fact that people are trying to be a little bit edgy.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mentioned bright pink skins, and now people are pinging me.
Yeah. They're gonna hold you to that.
Sweet Lord.
All right, that's cool. So Alliance tournament's gone on for many years. I know
what
were we at? 15?
17 will be the next
17.
one.
17. But remember, they weren't annual. So they were for a long time, they were 2 per year.
Absolutely. For a few years, they were 2 per year.
One last thing, I can tell you're getting tired because it's what 4 a.m. over there. But how big an influence was the media for the Alliance tournament? You said early on it was Eve Radio that kind of put it together.
Yeah, I mean, so in the early days, and it was back in the days when Zilliano and Spiral Junkie were running Eve TV effectively, which was, my God, that was 06, 07, and before that as well. So it was Alliance tournament. It was the Caldari Championships, 82, 3, 4, 5, and 6, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then after that was when CCP started to get more heavily involved in terms of like putting a lot more dev resources into things. And then yeah, that was when things kind of really sort of took off.
Yeah, I remember watching the first ones I started watching was done entirely by like Eve TV, and Calm Down
Uh-huh.
and Spiral Junkie were there. And they had like the most bizarre guests, which their good guests were literally people that they kind of knew who would definitely come over. So like Kia Eds was a guest for a while. Tyrax had his giant pink fedora for a while. Uh, well, like XX Angel XX came for a bit.
Oh, really?
God, there was so many people in the early days. There's so many good names and random people as well. Yeah,
How
Eds
would
was
they
a
come
character.
by? Were they piped in from wherever they lived, or?
No, we used to do the same as what we do now to an extent. We used to select a group of experts and bring them out. That was how I actually first got involved in the tournament. It was back when I just founded my old pirate corp Vito, and a couple of my guys were like, "Hey, you're an edgy, annoying dude who says a lot of controversial shit. You should apply. You should apply to be an Alliance tournament commentator." I was like, "What's this madness?" They're actually letting players do this, and I was like, "All right, fair enough. I'll apply." And I was well known at the time that people were just like immediately was like, "Yeah, let's get this guy over." And it was actually shortly after I'd had a massive car accident. So I was I was when I did AT4, I was in the recovery process from recovering from a broken neck.
Oh,
So I
did
was
you
like
have a neck
sat there
brace?
like, yeah, well, I didn't have a neck brace on.
Oh,
I didn't have it on set, but I was sat there basically like a friggin' I sat there like sort of like Pinocchio the wooden doll in the chair, just like, oh my god, this is so friggin' painful. I'm just gonna channel the pain and be really obnoxious when someone loses a match. So yeah, it was really it was an interesting experience, and it was something that quite frankly brought me out of my shell quite a bit. I was terrified before the first time we went on air. I can distinctly remember the set of Alliance Tournament 4 being in like a in an old studio apartment on Fiskisloth, which is the next street over from Grandagora, where CCP is. And it was unbelievable. I was petrified. I was physically shaken for the last like 5 minutes before we went on air because I'd never done anything like this before. And then within 15 minutes, we all found our element, and it was great.
yikes! I can't. I really can't imagine because it was so entertaining to watch. But maybe a lot of that flying by the seat of your pants translated to the screen or something because it was so entertaining to watch the Alliance tournament before. Maybe because it was again when you're new to the game, that's when you're bonding with it, so everything's really magical at that time. Um,
It's also, I think it's also toned down compared to how crazy it used to be as well. It was
mm,
we used to get away with a lot more on air as well, like saying trolling teams a little bit more, being a little bit more edgy, saying a little bit more crazy stuff, having a little bit more fun. I distinctly remember in past days dropping significantly more f bombs than I do now on air. Maybe I've just become a little bit old and slightly more respectful of what I'm doing, but I can remember on a number of occasions dropping the good old fashioned f bomb repeatedly, and it's fun, it's something that gives you a lot of enjoyment when you can just really get to the roots of it and just enjoy spaceships and blowing shit up.
yeah.
I mean, you say the AT got more refined, but the last AT that was in Iceland, Jin 10 ended the recording. Out of no one saw this one coming, but because the Viger won, he used probably the only Russian that he knows that he's picked up in online gaming, and that's just how the broadcast ended. It was just Jintan cursing, and then okay, off air, and that was it.
Yeah. There is actually a wonderful freeze frame of me attempting to cover his mouth at the minute. I think it's like the last frame of the broadcast is me like just like rolling my eyes and trying to cover his mouth because he's got a dirty, filthy adolescent mouth that he needs to keep shut. But it was, I mean, that one. We'll give him that.
All right. Well, we're at the 90-minute mark, so we're going to wrap it up. But Astro, keeps poking me to ask you a question about the event. I think he's talking about Guardians Gala. And his words,
Absolutely.
He writes, can you ask about the broken event tasks? Tasks not refreshing, sites not responding, accusations of balance. Those are his 3 criticisms.
So we had the day that released. Obviously, we had the wonderful sentient rogue angel NPC that was doing 3000 TPS, which, from my point of view, was absolutely hilarious. But a lot of you guys didn't think that because you lost ships to it. But I thought it was really funny. I sat in the office and had a good old-fashioned giggle about the fact that, in an hour, 250 people got their asses handed to them by a single NPC. It was wonderful. In terms of the tasks not refreshing, and in terms of any bugs or issues, the team that were involved with the event are actually working on it. And I know there was a deployment today that fixed a couple of things, and then there's also going to be a couple of deployments tomorrow and I believe on Friday and Monday as well that should solve a lot of the issues. They're very much in tune and looking at the feedback threads that are out there, so you can expect action in the next couple of days, I would imagine.
That's this is the second time I've seen people say, "Oh, this event has some problems," and then to hear it correct within a few days. Like, you guys are really reactive to what people are saying.
Yeah, we've been trying a lot of new stuff. We've been trying a lot of new stuff in terms of the structure of events. We've been trying a lot of new stuff in terms of like incentivizing how people get into them, that kind of stuff too. We've also been trying a lot of new stuff in terms of artwork and environments and setting and that kind of stuff. So it's there's a lot of experimental stuff that we've been trying out too. It's pretty interesting. It's worked out well for the best part so far. But as always, Eve is very much a sandbox, and we're very much interested in hearing feedback from people on what's good, what's bad. Guardians Gala last year was very well received, so we're trying to build on it again this year, and hopefully trying to make it a little bit better.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, I want to thank you, Falcon, for coming on so late at your hour, and Elise too. Thank you guys.
I'm getting up for work in 4 hours.
Oh my God. But
so
thanks for thanks for coming on. Is there like anything else you wanted to say about Alliance Tournament or any other message you want to leave people with?
No, I mean, I'm just hoping the people, over the next couple of days are going to chill out a little bit and stop the rabble rouse and be a little bit more mature. There's no way in hell that I'm going to let organized PvP and tournaments in general die in Eve. I think they're the bread and butter of what we do in terms of engagement for a lot of our players. And we're going to try our hardest to make sure that we come back better, bigger, and stronger than ever. So I don't really think people need to worry about it. It's obviously painful having to announce that we're taking a hiatus, but it's a hiatus with the intention of actually coming back and looking at what we can do to make things better and to serve the community better. So it's just gonna be one of those things that people have to grin and bear for 2019. Come get drunk with us at events. Come talk to us at Vegas. If you can't make it out to an event physically, then catch us when we're on a live stream or shoot us an in-game email. You can also contact the community team at ccpgames.com. You can ping me on Twitter at ccp_Falcon. You can add Eve online if you want to, or whatever you feel like. Just, we're always open to feedback. You can ping me on Reddit via PM or just tag me about random shit like everyone else does on r/Eve. And if I'm if I'm around, I'll respond and I'll look at it. But or you can ping me on the forums as well. So it's I'm always open to chatting and talking shop with people. It's not something that I ever shy away from, and I'm more than happy to have a civil conversation with people when points come up. So yeah, it's nothing to hide from my point of view. I think it's always nice.
Cool. Elise,
No, just I
closing
guess
thoughts?
just remember essentially what Falcon just said, right? The last part is he's literally saying that the AT isn't going away, or competitive gameplay in Eve in an organized way is not going away, right? So it's not, you don't have to freak out and think, oh, Eve is dying, or Alliance Tournament is dying. I'm going to unsub for the rest of my life. Rip. Just take a breather. Realize you have a summer to yourself for once in a decade. So
Yeah, see you in 2020. Yeah, that's like that's my thinking right now is see what we can do to kick ass,
Yeah.
make it fun.
All right. Well, I want to say again, thanks, Falcon. Thanks, Elise, for hanging out with us on Talking in Stations. Thanks, you guys that showed up and chatted in the chat here. We will see you guys on tomorrow when we have Artemis doing the midweek report, and we'll see you on Sunday as well.
Always a pleasure, man.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay. We'll see you next time. Bye.